Okay, so now we've put this under our common denominator of x plus 3 and x plus 2. Now we need to do the same for the second term. And again, our denominator is going to be x plus 3 times x plus 2. And so what we need to do quickly is look and say, what do we have to multiply this by, top and bottom, to get that as the denominator? And we already have the x plus 2, so we need to multiply it by x plus 3 on the bottom. And whatever we do to the bottom, we also have to do to the top, just like that. So now we will have x minus 7 on the top and x plus 3, just like that. Now, these questions are not complicated. They're really not. This step of finding a common denominator creates a big ugly mess, but it's not an incredibly complicated thing. We just multiply these two together. We just see which factors are on the bottom, and we multiply them together so that they're both on each side. And we can go ahead and combine this into a single fraction. X plus 3 times x plus 2 on the bottom, and then on the top we have x minus 5 times x plus 2, and that's being added to x minus 7 times x plus 3. Now, what does become an issue is we're going to have to FOIL this out, collect like terms, and then factor. Those are the steps, all right? And I'm going to write the steps here. 1 is find a common denominator. All right? And then once you've found a common denominator, the next two steps we're going to have to follow are FOIL, collect like terms, factor, and then finally we're going to cancel, all right? And these become pretty systematic. We're always going to follow these same basic steps. So let's go ahead and do that. We've collected our like terms already, we found our common denominator already, rather. Now we need to FOIL it out. So when we go to FOIL it out, we'll do the first one first. We're going to do first with first, so x times x, and then the outsides, x with 2, and then the insides, negative 5 with x, and then the last. Oh boy, a lot of terms, right? But that's okay. We just take it one step at a time. So x times x is, I'm going to work a little higher up because this might take a few lines. So x times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. Negative 5 times x is minus 5x. And lastly, negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. And now I've FOILed this side. There it is. Now we're going to do the same with this side. All right? Plain and simple. So again, we're going to do first, outside, inside, and last. All right? We're going to FOIL it, just like we always do, rainbowing if you prefer. And because it's addition here, it's nice and easy. I don't even need to bother with a bracket because none of the signs are going to change, so it's easy. X times x gives us plus x squared. X times 3 gives us plus 3x. Negative 7 times x gives us minus 7x. And lastly, negative 7 times 3 gives us minus 21. So there we go. We've found our common denominator. We've FOILed. Next, we have to collect like terms. So go ahead, pause this video and do that. All right, I'm going to assume we're back. So if we look here, I'm going to quickly go and say, okay, I have an x squared here, and it's going to go with an x squared here to give us 2x squared. All right, and now we have the x's. I have 2x, negative 5x, 3x, and negative 7x. All right, I have to collect all 4 of those terms. 2 minus 5 is negative 3, plus 3 is 0, minus 7 is negative 7, and I'm left with negative 7x. All right. And lastly, we have these terms. I have negative 10 and negative 21, and those add up to minus 31. All right, and that is all over. X plus 3 and x plus 2. All right, so we've collected our like terms. All right, so we've collected our like terms, and now in this case, in this particular case, this does not factor nicely. If you look, there's no common factor. All right, and then if we were to use the AC rule, if we wanted to use sum and product, it would be a sum of negative 7 and a product of negative 62, and there's just no number that gives you that. So this won't factor nicely, so we don't have to worry about this. And because it won't factor, it also won't cancel, and that would be our final answer. But if this one were factorable, then you would have to factor it. All right, and that brings us to our last question. And this one's a doozy, all right? This brings all of the skills together. This is challenging stuff without a doubt, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find a common denominator, then we're going to FOIL out, collect like terms, factor, and cancel. Even finding a common denominator here is challenging because we have to factor both of these. If you look here, these were already factored for us. Here, they're not factored. Here you have to do the factoring yourself. So, let's get to it. First things first, we're going to factor. All right. So, when we factor this, obviously the top is going to remain unchanged. The bottom, it's not a perfect square, so we have to use sum and product. A sum of 2 and a product of negative 48. Well, that's not so bad. We have 6 times 8 is 48, so negative 6 times 8 or negative 8 times 6 comes to mind. Which one of these gives us a sum of positive 2? And that's this one here. So, x minus 6 and x plus 8. And there we go. We factored that term. Not so bad. Now, we subtract this one. And the top now is x minus 9. I like to go ahead and put these in brackets, by the way, because you're going to be multiplying them soon enough. So it'll make your life a little easier. And again, we're going to have to use sum and product. This time we have a sum of negative 1 and a product of negative 30. All right, you can take a minute, pause the video if you like and do that, but it's going to work out to be negative 6 times positive 5 are the sum and product we use, and so we get x minus 6 and x plus 5. Good, all right. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, what you really need to be reviewing is factoring, which we've done a lot of already. And there we go. Now, quickly we're going to say, okay, what's our common denominator going to be? We have to find a common denominator. Well, this denominator has an x minus 6. This denominator has an x minus 6. But this one has an x plus 8. And this one has an x plus 5. So we're going to have a common denominator that has all 3 of those terms. So our common denominator will end up being x minus 6, x plus 8, and x plus 5. It'll just be all 3 terms together. So, x minus 6, x plus 8, and x plus 5. And to accomplish that, what did I have to multiply this by, top and bottom? Well, I already had the x minus 6, I already had the x plus 8, so I just had to multiply in the x plus 5. So we do x plus 5 on the top, and x plus 5 on the bottom. And when we do that, the top becomes x plus 5 times x plus 9, and there we go. Now, we now have to subtract the second one. All right, and again, with this here, I had to multiply by what? Well, I already had x minus 6. I already had x plus 5, so the only term missing is x plus 8. So I put an x plus 8 on the top. And whatever I do to the top, I also have to do to the bottom. And that's it. And what I'm left with here is x minus 9 times x plus 8. And on the bottom, x minus 6, x plus 8, and x plus 5. And we can now put this into one big long term, x minus 6, x plus 8, and x plus 5, just like that. And on the top, we now have to FOIL it out. So pause this video again, go ahead and do that. And when you come back, we'll practice it. All right, so you're back. We're going to FOIL the first term out. And when we do that, I'm going to get x times x, which gives us x squared, x times 9, which gives us 9x, 5 times x, which gives us 5x, and 5 times 9, which gives us 45. And there we go. And we're also going to FOIL out the other side. And when we do that, I will get minus. Now keep in mind, I've got to put all this in brackets, right? Because we're going to have to flip the sign of everything inside when we're all said and done. X times x gives me x squared. X times 8 gives me 8x. Negative 9 times x gives me minus 9x. And negative 9 times 8 gives me negative 72. Just like that. Now we're going to rewrite this, and we're going to FOIL that negative sign in. It's going to flip the sign of every single term inside the bracket. This is an important step just to be careful with. And when I do that, I get x squared plus 9x plus 5x plus 45 minus x squared minus 8x plus 9x plus 72. I've simply flipped every sign by multiplying that negative sign in. And the bottom remains x minus 6, x plus 8, and x plus 5. Just like that. Now we just have to collect our like terms. So we're going to do that. It may look big and ugly, but we just do it carefully. So we'll come up here, and we'll say, okay, well, I have x squared minus x squared, so those cancel. That's easy. So x squared cancels with x squared. Now I have 9x. I have 9x plus 5x minus 8x plus 9x. All right, so that gives us 9 and 5 is 14, minus 8 is 6, plus 9 is 15. So that gives us 15x. And then lastly, we have 45 and 72, and that adds up to 117. And that is all over x minus 6, x plus 8, and x plus 5.